Part 1: The Guardian's Promise. In the world of insects, parenthood is often measured in moments rather than days. For many species, the responsibility ends as soon as the eggs are laid. Glück. The next generation is left to face the challenges of the natural world alone, relying on instinct, chance, and sheer numbers to ensure that at least a few survive. Beneath the quiet surface of a tropical lotus pond. Glück. One remarkable hunter follows a very different path. The giant water bug is known throughout wetlands as a powerful aquatic predator, hidden beneath floating leaves and submerged vegetation. Glück. It patiently waits for fish, tadpoles, insects, and even small frogs to wander within striking distance. With lightning-fast forelegs and a sharp, piercing beak, it is one of the most effective ambush hunters in freshwater ecosystems. Glück. Yet today, this hunter has no interest in hunting. Its attention is fixed on something far more fragile. Above the waterline, attached to the stem of a single reed, rests a cluster of tiny eggs. Glück. Each one contains the beginning of a new life. Together they represent the future of an entire generation. These eggs have not been placed underwater by accident, unlike many aquatic insects. Glück. Giant water bug eggs develop in the air, safely above the water's surface. This unusual strategy provides the embryos with a constant supply of oxygen while reducing the risk of drowning or fungal growth. Glück. But this advantage comes at a cost. Exposed to open air, the eggs face a different set of dangers. The tropical sun can dry them out, heavy rain can damage them, strong winds can shake the supporting stem. Glück. Predators may discover them at any moment. Without protection, many would never survive long enough to hatch. After carefully laying each egg onto the reed, the female completes her role in the life cycle. Glück. Slowly she climbs away from the nest. She will not know farewell, no final inspection, no hesitation. Her task is complete. From this moment forward, another parent takes over. Glück. Waiting quietly beneath the newly laid eggs is the male. For him, the most demanding chapter of reproduction is only just beginning, rather than searching for food or another mate. Glück. He settles into position directly below the clutch. His body remains pressed against the reed, perfectly aligned beneath the eggs. This is not a temporary stop. It is the beginning of a commitment that may last for many days. In the insect world, such devotion is extraordinarily rare. While parental care is common among birds and mammals, relatively few insects invest so much time and energy after reproduction. Glück. Most species depend on producing large numbers of offspring instead of protecting individual eggs. The giant water bug has evolved a different solution, instead of abandoning the next generation to chance. Glück. Male dramatically increases their odds of survival through constant care and vigilance. His first responsibility is simple but essential. The eggs must never dry out, although they develop above the water. Glück. They cannot survive if they lose too much moisture. Throughout the coming days, the father will repeatedly wet the eggs using water carried from the pond, maintaining the delicate conditions required for healthy embryonic development. Glück. Just as importantly, he will guard them. Every passing insect, every curious predator, every sudden movement of the surrounding vegetation, everything becomes part of his world. Glück. The hunter that once watched for prey now watches for danger. Around him, the lotus pond appears calm. Dragonflies skim across the water's surface. Gentle ripples spread beneath floating leaves. Glück. Small fish swim through shafts of sunlight filtering into the clear water below. Frogs call from distant patches of vegetation to an outside observer. This wetland seems peaceful. Glück. But appearances can be deceiving. Every day, countless creatures search for food. Many of them would gladly consume an unprotected clutch of eggs. The father responds to this constant uncertainty with patience rather than aggression. Glück. Most of the time he remains completely motionless. Stillness itself becomes a form of protection. Every movement consumes valuable energy. Every unnecessary absence increases the risk to the eggs. Glück. Remaining close is the safest strategy. Hours slowly become days. Morning sunlight warms the reed. Afternoon breezes ripple through the lotus leaves. Evening shadows stretch across the pond. Glück. Night brings cooler air, distant frog calls, and the endless chorus of insects. The cycle repeats again and again. through every change in light, the father remains exactly where he began. Glück. His world has become no larger than a single reed, and the precious lives resting just above him. To many animals, reproduction ends with birth or the laying of eggs for this remarkable insect. Glück. It is only the beginning. Long before the young giant water bugs ever emerge, their survival depends on a father who asks for nothing in return. He cannot know how many will hatch. Glück. He cannot know what dangers tomorrow will bring, yet instinct has shaped his behavior over millions of years, guiding him to remain faithful to a task that offers no immediate reward. Glück. In nature, success is often known not by strength alone, but over the coming days, that persistence will be tested again and again. 30-second natural ambience, break, no narration. Glück. Allow approximately 30 seconds of uninterrupted natural sound. Only the gentle breeze moving through the lotus leaves, soft ripples spreading across the pond, dragonflies passing overhead. Glück. Distant frogs calling, birds singing from the shoreline, and the silent father still beneath his clutch of eggs. Transition to part 2. The days ahead will not be gentle. Glück. Heat, wind, predators, and powerful tropical storms will challenge both the father and the fragile lives he protects. His greatest test is only beginning. Part 2 days of devotion. The first morning passes quietly. Sunlight slowly spreads across the lotus pond, warming the broad floating leaves and the slender reed that supports the tiny clutch of eggs. Glück. Around the nest, life follows familiar rhythm. Dragonflies patrol the open water, small fish weave between submerged stems. Frogs rest in the shade, waiting for evening. Nothing appears unusual. Glück. Yet for the father, every hour matters. The embryos developing inside each egg are changing constantly. Their tiny bodies are dividing, growing, and becoming more complex with every passing day. Glück. But this remarkable transformation can only continue if the surrounding conditions remain stable. The greatest challenge is moisture. Although the eggs are safely positioned above the water where oxygen is abundant, Glück, they are exposed to the drying effects of sun and wind. Left unattended, they could lose the moisture required for normal development. The father responds with extraordinary precision. Glück. Again and again, he moves carefully between the water and the nest, carrying precious droplets that help keep the eggs from drying. Each visit is brief, each movement is deliberate. Glück. He wastes little energy and spends as little time away from the clutch as possible. After moistening the eggs, he carefully inspects them. His antennae move slowly across the surface of the cluster. Glück. Touching one egg after another. These delicate sensory organs provide information about the condition of the developing embryos and the environment surrounding them to human eyes. Glück. The movement seems almost gentle to the insect. It is an essential routine repeated countless times. The hours become days. Morning fades into afternoon. Afternoon gives way to dusk. Glück. As darkness settles across the wetland, an entirely different community awakens. Tree frogs begin calling from hidden branches. Night insects fill the air with an endless chorus. Glück. The surface of the pond reflects the moonlight like polished glass. Still, the father remains beneath the eggs. A time-lapse of the passing days reveals something extraordinary. Glück. The world never stops moving. Clouds drift across the sky. Lotus flowers bloom and close again. Morning mist rises before disappearing into warm sunlight. Rain showers come and go. Glück. The stars wheel silently overhead. Yet through every change, one small figure never abandons his place. For many insects, survival depends on mobility. For this father, survival depends on remaining exactly where he is. Glück. His dedication soon faces its first challenge. A dragonfly quietly on the same reed. It climbs upward with slow, deliberate steps. Its compound eyes scan the cluster of eggs above. Glück. For a brief moment, predator and guardian share the same narrow stem. The father reacts immediately. Glück. He pivots toward the approaching insect and raises his powerful raptorial forelegs, the same specialized limbs that normally sees struggling prey beneath the water. This time, Glück. They are used for an entirely different purpose. The display is enough. The dragonfly hesitates. Then, with a sudden burst of wings, it lifts into the air and disappears. The danger passes. Glück. Without pursuing the intruder, the father calmly returns to his position beneath the eggs. Protecting the nest does not require unnecessary conflict, only enough action to remove the threat. Glück. The pond grows quiet once again, but another visitor soon arrives. Under the cover of darkness, a hunting spider begins climbing the reed. The dragonfly, it moves with remarkable patience. Glück. Step by step, it closes the distance between itself and the vulnerable eggs. The father notices immediately. He tracks every movement. Neither animal rushes. The silence itself becomes tense. Glück. When the spider approaches too closely, the father suddenly lunges forward. His forelegs spread wide in a defensive posture. The spider pauses after several seconds of uncertainty. Glück. It turns away and descends into the darkness. Once again, the eggs remain untouched. Days continue to pass. The weather becomes increasingly unpredictable. Strong tropical winds sweep across the wetland. Glück. Thousands of lotus leaves sway together like waves across a green sea. The slender reed bends dramatically beneath each powerful gust. The egg cluster rocks back and forth above the water. Glück. The father tightens his grip. Every movement of the reed is transferred directly through his body. Still, he refuses to let go. The wind eventually fades. Another challenge has passed. Glück. But nature has one more test prepared. Far beyond the horizon, towering storm clouds begin to rise. The sky darkens long before sunset. Warm air gives way to powerful gusts of wind. Glück. The atmosphere becomes strangely quiet. Even the birds seem to disappear. Then the first flash of lightning tears across the sky. Moments later, thunder rolls over the pond. Another flash follows. Glück, then another. Within minutes, the entire wetland is engulfed by a tropical storm. Rain crashes onto the broad lotus leaves with astonishing force. Heavy drops strike the reeds. Glück, sending vibrations through every stem. Water pours from leaf to leaf before splashing back into the pond below. The egg cluster is shaken repeatedly. The father does not move. Glück. Pressed tightly against the reed, he absorbs every violent movement while continuing to shield the developing embryos above him. Around him, the world seems chaotic. The pond surface erupts beneath thousands of raindrops. Glück. Wind drives sheets of rain across the water. Thunder echoes through the surrounding forest. Lightning briefly illuminates the entire wetland before darkness returns for long minutes. Glück. The storm shows no sign of weakening, yet the father remains. When dawn finally breaks, the storm has passed. The air feels fresh. Tiny droplets cling to every lotus leaf. The pond becomes calm once more. Glück. The father slowly begins his routine again. He inspects the eggs, touches them gently with his antennae, adds fresh moisture where needed. Everything appears intact. His persistence has protected the next generation through another day. Glück, to many animals, courage is measured in moments of dramatic action. Here, it is measured differently. It is measured by remaining present. Part 3, a new generation. The storm has finally passed. As dawn spreads across the lotus pond, the wetland slowly returns to its familiar rhythm. Sunlight glitters across the calm water. Glück. Dragonflies once again patrol the open surface. Tiny fish weave through submerged stems, while distant frogs greet the new day with their calls to every creature around the pond. Glück. Life appears unchanged, but high above the water, attached to a single reed, something extraordinary is about to happen. For many days, the father has remained almost constantly beside his clutch of eggs. Glück. Through scorching sunlight, powerful, relentless rain, and countless potential threats, he has never abandoned his post. Now, at last, his patience is about to be rewarded. Glück. Inside tiny egg, an invisible transformation has reached its final stage. The embryos are no longer simple clusters of cells. They are now complete young giant water bugs. Glück. Folded tightly within their protective shells, their compound eyes have formed. Their 6 legs are fully developed. Even the piercing rostrum that will one day allow them to hunt has already taken shape. Glück. Everything required for independent life already exists. Only the shell remains between the young insects and the outside world. The father continues his familiar routine. He gently moistens the eggs once again. Glück. Ensuring that the delicate membranes remain healthy during these final hours. Then he pauses. Almost instinctively, he senses that something has changed. The eggs no longer look the same. Glück. Their pale surfaces have darkened noticeably. The tiny embryos inside have grown large enough to become visible through the shell. For several long moments, nothing moves, the pond is quiet. Glück. Only the gentle breeze stirs the lotus leaves. Then, almost too small to notice, one egg trembles. A second later, another begins to shake. Soon, tiny movements ripple across the entire cluster. Glück. Inside shell, a young insect pushes against the thin outer wall for the very first time. The pressure slowly increases. Minute cracks begin to appear. One shell splits open. Glück. A tiny head emerges cautiously into the morning air. The hatchling pauses. For the first time in its existence, it experiences light, fresh air, changing temperatures, and the movement of the wind. Glück. Within seconds, another sibling emerges, then another. Soon dozens of young giant water bugs are climbing free from their eggs almost simultaneously. Their bodies are soft and pale. Glück. Far lighter in color than the dark brown armor of their father. Over the coming hours, their exoskeletons will gradually harden, providing the protection needed for life in the wetland. Glück. For now, they remain extremely vulnerable. The father does not leave. Although most of his work is complete, he continues standing beneath the newly hatched young, discouraging any predator that might take advantage of this fragile moment. Glück. It is the final stage of a remarkable period of parental care. The hatchlings slowly explore the reed. Some remain close to the empty eggshells. Others begin climbing downward toward the water below. Glück. There is no instruction, no guidance, no communication between parent and offspring. Everything they do is driven by instinct, refined through millions of years of evolution, one by one. Glück. The young insects reach the surface of the pond. They hesitate briefly before stepping onto floating vegetation and entering the aquatic world that will shape the rest of their lives. Glück. From this moment forward, they are completely independent. Within only a short time, they will begin hunting tiny aquatic invertebrates. As they grow, they will molt repeatedly. Glück. Replacing their exoskeleton several times before finally reaching adulthood. With every molt, they become larger, stronger, and more capable predators. Only a small fraction can survive long enough to reproduce. Many will become food for fish, turtles, birds, or larger aquatic insects. Others will fall victim to changing water levels, pollution, or habitat loss. Such risks are part of every freshwater ecosystem. Glück. Nature has never guaranteed survival. Instead, it offers only opportunity. The father's extraordinary dedication has dramatically increased that opportunity. Without his constant care, Glück. Dehydration alone could have destroyed the entire clutch. Without his vigilance, predators might have consumed the eggs long before they hatched. His investment has not guaranteed success for every offspring. Glück, but it has given each one a far greater chance to begin life. Among insects, such paternal care is exceptionally rare. Most males never encounter their offspring after mating. Glück. They simply continue searching for additional opportunities to reproduce. The giant water bug has evolved along a different path. Glück. Scientists believe that guarding the eggs provides such a significant survival advantage that the time and energy invested by the father are ultimately repaid through greater reproductive success. Glück. Although remaining beside the eggs limits his ability to hunt and exposes him to predators, more of his offspring survive to adulthood. Over millions of years, natural selection has reinforced this remarkable behavior. Glück. It is one of the finest examples of parental investment found anywhere in the insect world. Slowly, the father's work comes to an end. The reed that has been his entire world for so many days is now almost empty. Glück. Only transparent eggshells remain, gently swaying in the morning breeze. Most of the hatchlings have disappeared among the stems and floating leaves, beginning lives that will unfold beyond his protection. Glück. At last, he releases his grip. With calm, deliberate movements, he climbs down the reed. Reaching the water's surface, he slips silently beneath it. Within seconds, he disappears among the shadows below. Glück. The devoted guardian becomes once again an ambush hunter. Life continues around the pond. Every species performs its own role. Dragonflies patrol the air. Fish search for food beneath the lily pads. Glück. Frogs wait patiently along the shoreline. Snails graze on aquatic plants. Countless microorganisms recycle nutrients hidden from view. Together, they form an intricate freshwater ecosystem where every species depends. Glück. Directly or indirectly upon the others, the giant waterbuck is an important predator within this community, helping regulate populations of many smaller aquatic animals, but its legacy extends beyond hunting. Glück. Its extraordinary parental care demonstrates that even among insects, evolution has produced complex strategies that balance survival, reproduction, and the future of an entire species. Glück. The story of this father is not one of emotion in the human sense. It is a story written by natural selection over countless generations, a behavior refined through millions of years because it works. Glück. Because it allows more young to survive. Because every successful generation continues a cycle that began long before humans ever walked the earth. And somewhere beneath another quiet lotus pond, the story is already beginning again. Closing narration. The greatest stories in nature are not always the loudest or the most dramatic. Sometimes they unfold quietly, hidden among reeds and reflected in still water. Glück. Here, beneath the leaves of a lotus pond, one father's unwavering devotion transformed fragile eggs into a new generation of hunters. It is a reminder that survival is shaped not only by strength or instinct, Glück, but also by persistence, sacrifice, and care. Long after this father disappears beneath the surface, the lives he protected will continue the ancient cycle of the wetland, one that has endured for millions of years. Glück, and one that still thrives wherever healthy freshwater ecosystems remain.